Dolmen is an upcoming action RPG from developer Massive Work Studio and publisher Prime Matter. Now, action RPG has become an almost meaningless term, much like action-adventure, so it's more appropriate to describe Dolmen as a new sci-fi Souls-like, in the same vein as The Surge or Hellpoint. Based on 2 runs, through a roughly 2-hour preview build, it's a good mix of Dark Souls combat and encounter design, with more streamlined elements. The story is presented without being vague or obtuse. The effect of leveling your attributes is clear, the crafting menus are intuitive, and beacons, think bonfires, are more reasonably placed. Dolmen, despite offering a choice of genders and light customization, ultimately places you in the boots of a defined and voiced character, guided by a Zoan Corporation AI, referred to as Control. In this universe, humanity has colonized several planets for resource extraction, using genetically modified humans to better survive the harsh conditions. The drillers, assigned to Revian Prime, have been mining the titular dolmen, a mineral capable of allowing interaction between dimensions when bombarded with energy. In typical video game fashion, a group of scientists, with a religious or cultish streak, contacted beings from another universe and decided to invite them in. It's your job to contain the resultant outbreak, recover dolmen samples, and discover a way to prevent future incidents. The narrative is primarily conveyed through cutscenes, at key moments or before boss encounters, though you'll also find several terminals and PDAs scattered around the world. These offer throwaway one-sentence messages that flesh out background events leading up to the incident. As someone who thoroughly enjoyed the sci-fi setting of both the Surge games, the premise and the world feel suitably novel for the genre, but the storytelling feels perfunctory. Lines feel overwritten, and several responses feel like 90s action movie cheese. But maybe that is the vibe they're going for, and the disjointed nature of the preview build is what made it feel tonally uneven. On the gameplay front, many of the basics follow classic Souls conventions. You've got dangerous enemies that'll shred your health bar if you let your guard down. There's stamina management for attacking, blocking, and dodging. There's a ubiquitous light, heavy, jumping, and sprinting attack variants. Baiting out attacks and openings based on your distance from a foe, a limited number of heals between beacons, collecting nanites, think souls, to level your attributes, respawning enemies in corpse runs to recover nanites when you die, and the farming of creatures for gear drops, or rare resources to forge and enhance your own. As a result, any Souls fan will pick up Dolmen and feel right at home within minutes, though that's not to say it doesn't have a few novel elements. The most obvious addition to the Souls formula is a dedicated energy bar, which can be recharged with basic attacks to a degree, but is primarily refilled by consuming batteries. Think Estus flasks with a limited number of charges. Energy can be consumed to heal a chunk of your health bar, but is primarily used for your firearms and to trigger energy mode, both of which play into the elemental weakness system. Your firearms, think elementally charged pistols, shotguns, and rifles, are automatically drawn when aiming, and consume temporary energy, which slowly recharges after use. On the other hand, when activating energy mode, melee attacks are enhanced and use energy instead of stamina. Depending on your gear, this imbues your melee weapons with elemental effects, like fire, ice, and acid. Both these attack types are vital, as conventional physical damage, even with all your points pumped into strength, will only take you so far. Many foes, especially the bosses, seem to have an elemental weakness you need to exploit if you want to whittle them down quickly. In addition, these elemental effects also affect speed, resistances, and damage output, something that applies to you and the enemies. Certain weapons also seem synced to certain elements, triggering new attacks when your target is affected. Of course, you burn through energy quickly, ensuring you can't just cheese enemies with firearms, and you need to save energy mode for a crucial moment. Oh, and of course finding time to consume a battery mid-fight will always be a challenge. Other variations on the typical Souls formula include a secondary upgrade system that's based on the buffs provided by your gear. There are 3 upgrade paths, Human, Revian, and Driller, which offer a distinct focus, think energy and firearms, endurance and melee weapons, or resistances and nanite gain. These provide an additional layer of depth, and a reason to find and craft all the gear you can. Another interesting touch was the ability of your shield to reflect back most projectile attacks. The last aspect to touch on, and unfortunately one that didn't work during the preview build, is the multiplayer. You can find specific boss beacons, which allow you to summon other players by consuming Dolmen crystals, and also playing into the multi-dimension lore. Alternatively, you can respawn previously defeated bosses, allowing you to farm them for some rare resources. For those concerned, Dolmen doesn't seem to do boss runs, so most beacons are always a short enemy-free jog away when you respawn. Now, I was initially concerned about accepting a PC review build, given I primarily play on consoles these days and my gaming notebook is going on 5 years old. However, Dolmen proved surprisingly scalable for an Unreal Engine 4 game. With an i5-8300H, a 4GB GTX 1050 Ti, 16GB of DDR4 RAM, and Dolmen installed to just a standard SATA-connected SSD, I could play the preview build of Dolmen at 1080p 60 on epic settings, with AMD Fidelity FX smoothing out any dips using the balanced option. Now, admittedly, Dolmen looks good from an environment and creature design perspective, but it's not the most technically impressive release, and this performance bodes well for both current and last-gen console versions. On the audio front, combat and enemy sounds are loud and chunky, but the soundtrack felt underwhelming, and I can't recall any standout moments. When it comes to aspects of the game they can still improve before launch, my hope is Massive Works Studio focuses on attack animations and hitboxes. Swinging away at enemies still feels floaty, at least when you're not landing elemental attacks, robbing a lot of the combat of impact. More problematic was the inconsistent range of some attacks in comparison to their animations. The first boss in the preview build, a massive insectoid creature, had an unblockable claw strike that excelled at hitting my character despite clearly making no contact. The second and final encounter features a swordsman with massive sweeping attacks, though these often missed my character despite clearly passing through him. Given that Dolmen is already a tough game, especially when dealing with multiple enemy types concurrently, these inconsistencies just ramp up the frustration. Overall, Dolmen feels like a competent sci-fi take on Dark Souls, with all the genre basics in place, modified by an interesting energy management system, and a focus on exploiting elemental weaknesses. I enjoyed my playthrough, figuring out how to swiftly dispatch the first boss, surviving the massive jump in difficulty in the next area, and being repeatedly trounced by the second boss. But it still felt too familiar. It now remains to be seen just how deep these additional systems are, and whether the story and setting will amount to anything more than a perfunctory backdrop to the action.